The opening scene shows Bus, a young girl with her head in a large container, while her parents argue over money and vices. The scene also flashes a series of childhood traumas she endured. It is a coping mechanism she has discovered, hoping to drown out the voices and erase the dreadful memories. Now grown up and having a daughter, Bus relies on her food cart to make ends meet as a single mother. However, it's insufficient to settle her husband's debt, and the landlord demands payment, or they will be evicted from the house. Bus's husband is nowhere to be found, so she has no option but to settle the debt one way or another. Bus always ensures that her daughter consumes vegetables and takes her medicine whenever they eat. Afterward, she locks the gate before venturing out onto the streets, pushing her food cart. But then, within an hour on the road, Bus gets ensnared in the midst of a riot. As violence escalates, one of the protesters, Adafal, extricates Bus from the riot into a secluded spot. Another protester employs the food cart to obstruct the police and shield his fellow demonstrators. Eventually, the police quell the crowd through force, and Bus separates from Adafal, who flees while she retrieves her food cart. Upon returning home, Bus discovers her daughter in the backyard, playing with ants and plants. As punishment for disobeying her, Bus repeatedly strikes her daughter's arm, reminiscent of what her mother did to her in the past. Tears stream down Bus's face as she does so, as painful memories resurface. But upon noticing the red marks on her daughter's arm, Bus composes herself and apologizes to her daughter. Her daughter reciprocates the apology and embraces her mother. However, she notices something amiss. The daughter points it out, and Bus sees blood on her cart. She opens the compartment, and the dead body of the protester emerges. Instead of panicking and reporting it to the police, Bus cleans the blood from his body and uses the meat grinder on him. Several days pass, and Adafal becomes increasingly anxious as his protesting friend remains missing. One day, while Bus is at the pharmacy, she encounters Adafal, who works for the owner. They recognize each other, but unlike Adafal, Bus walks away and leaves, indifferent to him. His attention swiftly shifts to Nita, a lovely young woman whom he admires from a distance. Later that day, the partner of Bus's former maid arrives at her house, inquiring about her. Bus invites him inside and treats him to her delectable cooking. After he finishes the meal, Bus informs the man that her maid eloped with her despicable husband. Later that evening, Bus confides in her daughter about her intention to transform their residence into a noodle shop, reminiscent of the one her mother operated in the past. Flashbacks unveil Bus's mother repeatedly striking her stepfather's hand upon discovering his inappropriate advances towards Bus. A few days afterward, Bus proceeds with her plan and converts their home into a noodle shop, receiving favorable feedback from every patron on her culinary skills. Unbeknownst to them, Bus disgustingly includes a human head in her soup. Despite the addition, her business thrives, and soon Adafal becomes her companion after sampling her noodle soup. He assists her in managing the shop, and a romance blossoms between them. One evening, while tidying up, the landlord arrives with two associates, demanding payment. Bus requests more time, citing the recent commencement of her business, but the landlord adamantly refuses to delay any further. In the interim, she serves them 3 portions of her noodle soup, which they enjoy. Meanwhile, Adafal informs his friend's mother that he remains clueless about her son's disappearance. He also expresses concern about the persistent surveillance by the police, suspecting their involvement in his friend's vanishing act. The following day, as he goes to Bus's, Adafal discovers her shop in disarray, while she bears bruises on her face and arms. Bus appears distressed, so Adafal comforts her with his words, rather than with force. Unbeknownst to him, Bus is not the victim. It turns out, while the landlord is dining with his men, Bus slashes his throat with a meat knife. His men recoil in horror as they begin to feel the effects of the poison that Bus has mixed with their food. Bus viciously attacks them one by one. She kills one of the men by stabbing him with a sharp implement in his mouth, then repeatedly bashes the chubby one's head onto a nail before ending his life with the large knife. Afterward, she coldly observes the landlord writhe to death after removing the knife. The floor is drenched in blood from the 3 men she just murdered, and Bus manages to drag their bodies all by herself. She cleans the mess while her daughter watches as if it's a routine occurrence. Afterward, she purifies their bodies before butchering them to use as new meat for her noodle soup. As the flashback unfolds, Adafal reassures that he will always be there for Bus. As Bus feels Adafal's concern for her, their emotions soon lead them to the bed. Meanwhile, the daughter stands outside, peeking through the small door gap, and this scene prompts a flashback. A much younger daughter does the same thing, watching her hormone-rich father engage in an affair with another woman, their maid no less, while her cash-poor mother is selling food. They eventually catch her watching them, and when Bus returns home, she finds her daughter's artificial leg on the floor. Upon seeing that, she looks for her daughter and finds her at the back. The flashback ends, and while Bus is awake, Adafal finds a cabinet full of her daughter's medication. He remembers Bus buying it at the pharmacy, but all of them are still unused. This raises his suspicions, so Adafal looks around the house. Another flashback reveals that the daughter's father and mistress take her to the back, where they put her inside the big container. Then the mistress sits on the lid to drown her, but the daughter cannot be easily killed just like that. As they push her head in the container, Bus catches them in the act. So she marches at them angrily and knocks them down before tearing off the mistress's leg flesh to stop her from running away. She then wounds her husband's leg, causing him to fall down on the cut and sharp bamboo sticks, one of which pierces the corner of his eye. As she turns around, she follows the traces of blood from the mistress's wound, who's attempting to escape. Bus cuts off her right arm with one stroke of a cutting knife and then drags her. After that, she returns to the container to free her daughter, but it's too late. Her daughter is dead from drowning. Just then, Adafal reaches the back, where he finds the daughter's artificial leg on top of the container. He removes the lid, only to find the daughter's head floating in the water. As Adafal stumbles from shock, he notices Bus standing not far from him, so he bravely confronts her. Bus sputters as she tells Adafal that her daughter is only sick and is still alive. Adafal rebuts that she's crazy because it's clearly a dead body floating in that container. Suddenly, Bus screams aloud in pain before breaking into tears, and the flashback scenes reveal that she has been pretending that her daughter is alive all along. She talks to her daughter's doll as if it's her daughter, and the slash marks she inflicted on her daughter were actually on herself. The next scene takes place at the police headquarters, where Adafal gives his statement to the officers, alleging that Bus is mentally unstable and troubled. Then, a flashback reveals him unearthing two dolls tied together. Meanwhile, Bus is in another room, being interrogated by a police officer. She's inquired about the mistress and her husband's whereabouts, but Bus remains silent, as memories of what she did to them flash in her mind. It is unveiled that after injuring them, Bus binds their hands with a wire. Afterward, she gazes at them for an uncomfortably long duration before taking a thick wire and plunging it into her husband's cheek, piercing the mistress too. At present time, the police release Bus, as they still lack concrete evidence. Another flashback discloses the mistress utilizing black magic and the two dolls Adafal excavated in order to entice Bus's husband into her deceptive trap. The flashback concludes, and Adafal proceeds with his life, now with Nita. As he forges another romantic relationship, Bus still submerges her head in the container, but not solely to drown the voices. She does it to drown her fury and envy too. She relentlessly stalks Adafal. Another flashback unveils Bus's head wriggling, attempting to free herself from the container, while she's being SA'd by an unidentified man and her stepfather. Shortly thereafter, Bus becomes pregnant, and upon learning what happened to her daughter, Bus's mother descends into madness and cannibalism, a trait Bus has become accustomed to growing up. After the harrowing flashbacks, Bus goes to Nita's residence and entices her into her abode by fabricating that Adafal will come to meet her. Before long, Adafal arrives at Nita's house, only to discover that Bus had deceived Nita, and he discerns it's no accident. Bus offers Nita a glass of water with sleeping powder, and upon awakening, Nita finds herself immersed in blood within a freezer. She shrieks in horror and revulsion as she discovers heads and limbs floating in the literal bloodbath. Another flashback exposes Bus severing the mistress's partner's leg before rendering him unconscious and initiating the torment. She drives nails into his fingers, and despite the excruciating pain, the man strives to liberate himself. Nevertheless, Bus returns shortly after with a winnower of spices, which she compels into his mouth. Subsequently, she allows him to crawl away, only to encounter her husband devouring the flesh of the mistress's leg. As he recoils in horror, Bus severs his fingers and renders him unconscious. She then suspends him with a chain and thrusts a knife into his abdomen. Meanwhile, Nita attempts to escape from the freezer while yelling for help, but she fails, as there are objects on the lids hindering her. At that exact moment, Adafal rushes into Bus's residence. However, upon hearing his threatening screams from downstairs, Bus returns upstairs. She partially opens the gate, but Adafal forcefully enters and inquires about Nita's location, while tightly gripping her arm. Bus ironically comments on how men always resort to violence, prompting Adafal to regain his composure and apologize for unintentionally causing harm. She leaves Adafal upstairs and descends, only to discover that Nita has managed to flee from the freezer. Bus gropes inside the freezer, and Nita stealthily approaches her, attempting to shove her. Nevertheless, Bus steadies herself and swiftly seizes Nita by the hair. Nita breaks loose and flees, stumbling upon Bus's husband and the mistress's lifeless bodies. Despite initially faltering, Nita composes herself and conceals from Bus. She commences climbing the stairs slowly and silently when Bus slashes her Achilles tendon. Nita shrieks in agony, collapsing onto the frigid ground, rendering herself unconscious. However, Adafal remains oblivious to her cries. Hence, Bus transports her to a room and secures her to a table. Initially sharpening her hefty knives, she then proceeds to cleanse Nita's arms. Meanwhile, Adafal discovers Nita's shoulder bag while waiting upstairs, confirming Bus's possession of Nita. Consequently, he commences searching for them and apprehends Bus hammering a nail into Nita's arm. Despite being caught red-handed, Bus persists in her actions, prompting Adafal to topple her over. He then rouses Nita. However, upon witnessing him remove the nail from her arm, she perceives him as Bus's accomplice. Grabbing one of the knives, she defends herself against Adafal, who endeavors to elucidate the truth. Suddenly, he realizes that Bus has absconded. Simultaneously, Bus instills fear in all those she encounters. Wandering outside, drenched in blood and brandishing a knife, Bus appears unhinged and completely disconnected from reality, tormented by the voices in her mind once more. Adafal follows her into the local market, but Bus is already walking along the train tracks barefooted. Another flashback reveals a traumatic experience. It turns out, her stepfather sells her out to a man who abuses her at their first meeting. One day, while eating with a friend, Bus's stepfather and his friend start vomiting before losing consciousness. It's revealed that Bus's mother poisoned them after discovering what he did to her daughter. This is the start of them descending into complete madness. Like Bus, her mother uses human flesh as meat in her noodle soup shop. The scene returns to the present, wherein Bus gazes at the lake from the bridge. She breaks down into tears as she recalls herself facing a home pregnancy due to financial issues. As the daughter comes out of her, Bus fails to grasp the baby, causing her to fall and have a disfigured face growing up. She then begins hallucinating her daughter in the water. Not long after, Adafal finds her, and he expresses regret for contributing to her traumatic experiences with men. However, the voices in her head urge her to harm Adafal, as he's a bad person. Bus endeavors to resist them for the sake of her remaining sanity, but she fails miserably as she starts envisioning her daughter's face and hearing her voice, calling out to her for them to come home. Bus drops the knife before leaping off the bridge to drown herself and escape everything. Night has already fallen, and the police deduce that her body might have drifted away as they fail to locate her. Adafal is taken to the police station, where he's accused of the murders, as his fingerprints are on one of the murder weapons, and because of Nita's statement. Meanwhile, Bus survives and enters a house, where she imagines her mother chopping off the human flesh she butchered from her victims. The movie concludes with a mother and a father displaying violence toward their young daughter, while people merely observe and pass by the scene. Did this story spook you out? Let us know in the comments below. For more horror movie recaps, subscribe to our channel, and we will see you in the next one. Fear awaits you.